On a late August night, a rural family in Kentucky would have their lives changed forever. They would claim to both encounter and shoot at short metallic aliens outside of their home. The police would find their fear to be real, and investigators would find their story to be consistent and credible. But the family would find themselves swallowed by a media circus, and harassed in person by crowds and vilified with lies that would sweep national headlines. Their violent encounter, and how it contributed to the UFO craze of the 50s, still shapes modern pop culture to this day. This is what helped begin it all. This is the Kelly-Hopkinsville encounter. On the quiet Sunday night of August 21st, 1955, out in the small rural community of Kelly, near the town of Hopkinsville, Kentucky, the Sutton family farmhouse was full and lively. Billy Ray Taylor had left the home to retrieve water from the homestead's well when something strange caught his eye. It was a bright light in the shape of a saucer. It glided silently across the farm, only about 30 to 40 feet above, and then stopped abruptly. Then it landed vertically in a field behind the house and out of Billy's sight. He then ran back to the home. Inside was a large amount of people, the widow and owner of the home, Glennie Langford, and her 3 young children. Also present were her adult children, JC and Lucky Sutton from her first marriage, along with each of their wives. Billy Ray Taylor's wife was present as well, as was a family friend named O.P. Baker. In total, there were 8 adults and 3 children. Billy was now in a panic and saying how he just saw a UFO land nearby, but no one was taking him seriously. Billy was known as an eccentric man prone to exaggeration, something that he picked up as a carnival worker. And to everyone else, this seemed to be just another one of his tall tales. The family made light of the story being told, laughed, and went about their night as usual, but they couldn't have known just how real his story was about to become. An hour after this supposed UFO landed, their dog outside began barking. Lucky and Billy rushed outside to see what was upsetting him so much, and they saw the dog tuck its tail between its legs and run and hide under the home. And it's then when the group saw it. There was a glow approaching from the fields, getting closer and closer. It was a small man, but not like one they've seen before. This one stood 3.5 feet tall, had silvery metallic skin, and had a light glow. It also had goblin-like ears, short stumpy legs, and arms that reached down to its ankles, ending with oversized clawed hands. And more terrifyingly, it was slowly approaching the farmhouse with its arms raised upwards, walking awkwardly without bending its knees, if it had any at all. But their focus was drawn to its eyes, which were bulging, large, and glowing yellow. The men retreated to their home and grabbed their firearms. Lucky picked up a 12-gauge shotgun, and Billy grabbed a .22 rifle. And then they waited. The being approached the back door of the home, in view of Billy and Lucky, and once it was 20 feet away, both men opened fire, blasting holes right through the screen door. The force of the shots sent the being into the air, only for it to flip, as the witnesses described, and then scurry away unharmed, using its long arms to propel itself forward. They went to the living room, where the rest of the women were, and another creature, or perhaps the same one, then appeared at the window. Both Billy and Lucky once again opened fire at it from inside the home, but again only to see it flip and run off. Wondering if the being was dead or injured, both men then went outside, but the situation would only escalate from there. Billy led the way, but before he could step out and into the yard, the rest of the family standing behind him saw a clawed hand reach down from the overhang above the door and try to clutch at his hair. In a later interview, Mrs. Glennie Langford would say, "By then, my son Lucky, who had been guarding the other doorway, had also arrived at the front door, coming through the house. He pushed out the door past Billy and Aileen and shot at the thing while it was still on the overhang above the front door." Billy pointed out that there was another in a nearby tree which was close to the house. Bang! Both men then shot it, once more sending it flying. But something strange happened. It didn't fall to the ground as you would expect. It floated to the ground. They shot at it again, and it finally scurried off into the woods, but was still unharmed. And bizarrely, each time they yelled at or shot at these creatures, the glow of their bodies increased momentarily in response. Just as the last one left, another came around the house, perhaps the one that had just been flung off the overhang moments before. It's here that Lucky brought his shotgun almost point blank on the creature. Bang! And again, no effect. Fear overtook their bravery as they realized just how powerless they were, and they retreated inside. At this point, the kids were out of their beds and watching the ordeal, and all of the adults, minus one, had seen the creatures directly. They huddled inside, but they heard scraping atop their metal roof. Something was up there. The men once again went outside and saw a creature atop the house and fired at it. But mysteriously, once more they saw this strange floating in action. It floated to the back fence, which was 40 feet away, and perched on it. Bang! They shot it again, and finally, it ran off into the dark. At about 11 p.m., they made the choice that they would have to leave the farmhouse altogether, and everyone rushed into their 2 parked cars, scooping up one of the children who was helplessly frozen in fear, and they drove at top speed to the Hopkinsville police station in town. The absolute state of fear and terror from the family at the station prompted the police to take it seriously. As far as they were concerned, they had at least seen something out in those woods. One of the investigators noticed the state of Billy Ray Taylor, describing him as pale and almost hysterical. He then timed his pulse, noting it to be twice the normal rate. The station then radioed the Kentucky State Police, who redirected troopers patrolling the highways to go to the Sutton home out in Kelly to see what exactly was happening to cause this family to act like this. The sheriff's office sent a deputy sheriff with the family back to their home, and also called the chief of police, Chief Greenwall. June Taylor, the one adult who had refused to even look at the creatures, opted to remain at the station. The desk sergeant at the station called the chief of police and said, "A spaceship has landed at Kelly. If this is your idea of a joke, it's not mine. I'm not joking, Chief. The state police are sending units there." While on the way towards the home, one of the state troopers reported something unusual. There was a sound, like the whistling of artillery. It was coming from meteors, or something appearing to be meteors flying overhead. And there were 2 of them, traveling in a descending direction towards the Sutton farmhouse. The officer who saw them said they were larger and brighter than meteors he had seen before, and that they were definitely not ordinary. But later on, perhaps due to the overwhelming pressure of the media, he retracted his statement and said that they were indeed meteors and nothing more. But he did see something unusual, and he wouldn't be the only one. The scene at the farmhouse was now frantic. Police officers were all around, with the chief of police himself being present. And strangely, at least 4 military police from the nearby Fort Campbell were also present, alongside the Madisonville newspaper reporter, a newspaper photographer, and 1 or 2 bystanders who had followed the commotion. The photographer exited the car and said, "Now show me the roof where this little man is supposed to have been sitting." And one of the men replied, "Supposed? Hell, he was sitting there." The family waited outside until the authorities thoroughly searched the home, but the only thing found inside were the bullet holes and bullet casings. Chief Greenwell stated, "In and around the whole area, the house, the fields that night, there was a weird feeling. It was partly uneasiness, but not entirely. Everyone had it. There were men there that I'd call brave men. Men I've been in dangerous situations with. They felt it too. They've told me so." And then something screamed. Someone accidentally stepped on the tail of a cat. Police Chief Greenwell would say, "You never saw so many pistols unholstered so fast in your life." A researcher in this case wrote, "The fame of this anonymous cat seems to be permanent. Everyone I talked to mentioned that screech and the ensuing panic." But then the police did find strange things. One officer reported a strange greenish glow in the distance, but when it was investigated, it could not be found. And another odd thing discovered was a luminous patch of grass, roughly 1.5 feet in diameter, where one of these supposed little men was knocked onto after having been shot. Skeptics claim this is foxfire, a bioluminescent fungus, but a simple Google search will tell you foxfire does not grow on grass. So what was it? They never found out. By the end of the search, the home was empty, aside from the bullet damage and the shotgun shells scattered about. Police Chief Greenwell supervised the investigation and also looked explicitly for evidence of drinking, to which none was found, either by himself nor other investigators who had the same thought to look. Eventually, the investigators began to leave, saying they would return the following morning to resume the search. It was now 2 a.m., and the family was left alone at their farmhouse. They had just endured an otherworldly encounter, ran to get help, but now that help had just left them. They were now back to where they started. They did try to settle in for the night and go to sleep, but then they came back. Mrs. Glennie Langford had gone to bed, and all the lights had been turned off. Her head was turned towards her window, and she was trying to sleep, but a glow soon made her open her eyes. Right before her was one of the creatures, with its clawed hands on the window screen, and it was silently watching her. She had been the most level-headed of the family during the encounter, noticing that they weren't trying to harm the family at all. So she quietly told the rest of the family to come and look at the being, but Lucky had other plans. And before we judge, from Lucky's perspective, in this home were his mother, his wife, other women, and children. It was up to him to keep everyone safe.
Could I fail? Yes, I could. Will I back down? Will I give up? Hell no!
The rest of the night's details would become more vague, but the last encounter occurred at around 4 a.m. before the beings finally left for good. The following morning, the family was up early. The men left to do errands and tasks, and the 4 women were left at the farmhouse. As promised, investigators returned to continue their search, now aided by daylight. They examined the roof, finding no footprints or marks on it, and similarly found no footprints on the ground, but they noticed even they were not leaving footprints in the dirt due to prolonged drought having made it so dry. Minus the aliens greeting the police directly, it would be hard to have evidence outside of witness testimony, but that testimony is something the chief of police found very interesting. Chief Greenwell interviewed the women and attempted to deliberately trip up their descriptions. He'd asked them about their small eyes, their suits, and the noises they had made, but each and every time he was corrected by the women. They were noiseless, aside from the scraping on the roof, and had large, yellow glowing eyes, and weren't seemingly wearing anything at all. They were being stubbornly consistent. The state police interviewed the neighbors, and in the following days, a small team of police, led by Chief Greenwell personally, did a deeper, more thorough investigation of the woods. As it would turn out, their neighbors would actually corroborate the strange lights that had been seen that night. The story got weirder and weirder because the Air Force would claim later on in their Blue Book case file that the case was never officially reported to the Air Force and had no official investigation made. But that may have not been the whole truth, because Police Chief Greenwell stated that Air Force intelligence from Fort Campbell was definitely present during his investigations. And even more than that, the morning after the event, Billy Ray Taylor went hunting with a neighbor, and he and Billy watched 2 Army planes circling over the fields and woods, one of which they saw was a light observation plane, which they speculated was taking photographs. The other was a large aircraft, possibly either a DC-3 or C-119, both of which are from Fort Campbell. But even stranger, 2 mysterious men from a nearby commercial airfield, or so they claimed, contacted Police Chief Greenwell and conducted their own personal investigation. They provided no information on who they were or what they were looking for. However, oddly enough, the military being interested and lying about it was the least of their concerns, because this is also when the media frenzy began, and it would get very bad. It began slow, well, at first. The local radio station, WHOP, discussed it during their morning broadcasts, and a reporter from that station taped a short interview with the witnesses for their evening broadcasts. And also a local paper reporter and photographer came for a story. And then we meet Andrew Ledwith, one of the announcers of the WHOP station. He would encounter the Sutton family by chance, and get our first and most accurate depictions of the creatures they saw. Ledwith was a radio hobbyist in his free time, and he had run into a problem on his day off, which had him go into work to consult the chief engineer at his station about it. But there he was greeted by his coworkers immediately with the question, "Have you seen the little green men yet?" Ledwith writes in his own account of the event, "Remembering a magazine article that I had read not long before about the way that police artists reconstruct facial features from witness descriptions, I decided to try to clarify the situation. I had once studied art and thought I might be able to get sketches. With me went Mike Lackey, the son of the owner of the station WHOP. He could watch and listen, and make sure that I was not leading or guiding the people I interviewed. Equipped with pencils and paper, we drove out to the Sutton house." He met with the women of the home first, given the men were out, and exchanged pleasantries. He then began to ask them questions for the sketch. I did not lead the women in any way as the picture was drawn. They were extremely positive of what they had seen and had not seen. It was a matter of following their directions as to the shape of the face, eyes, hands, and body. If I even so much as advanced a supposition of how one particular feature might have looked, they would quickly correct me. Eyes like saucers, halfway around the side of the face. Ears that were flappy, like leather, pointed at the top and seemingly too big. A head which was circular and entirely bald. We progressed to the body. No one was sure whether there was a neck or not, so we left it out. According to the women, the body was thin, with a formless, straight figure. The arms and legs were spindly. The arms were peculiar. They were almost twice as long as the legs, and almost touched the ground. After the basic shape was completed, Mrs. Glennie Langford excused herself, saying that it was so like the apparition she had seen that she was not going to look at it any longer, and she went outside. Ledwith would leave and come back later, hoping to talk to the men when they got back home. And that's when it gets interesting, because we see how the men then react to seeing the sketch. About 1:45, Billy Ray Taylor walked in, gun in hand, returned from his hunting trip. I quietly laid the women's drawing on the bed next to which I was standing, and moved away. Billy Ray came into the room, glanced at the bed, saw the drawing, and ran over and picked it up, and gave us all the cold chills by declaring, "That's it! That's it! That looks just like it!" Ledwith then drew a second, separate picture with Billy Ray Taylor. But then, Billy began to experiment with other things to add to the drawing, including antennae and a nose, which he would later retract. Ledwith says a soldier, Private First Class Gary Hodson, also arrived from Fort Campbell while he was there, also interested in getting a sketch, allegedly coming in as a private individual and not on official business. Ledwith then turned Billy Ray Taylor over to him, a bit relieved because he felt that Billy was now getting caught up in exaggerating what he saw relative to what he actually saw. But now, by this time, sightseers were finding their way to the rural home. Lucky finally got home and was furious about it, because now cars were lined up for half a mile in both directions, and he couldn't park anywhere near his own home, and the front yard was now full of sightseers. But again, this is where it gets even more interesting, because we then see Lucky react to the sketch. Ledwith then wrote, "The door was thrown open, and in strode Lucky, scowling. What's going on here?" I felt that his mother had met with him in the front yard and had begged him to remove all the sightseers from the house and surroundings, and he was about to start with us. However, before he did anything else, his eyes dropped to the table where the women's drawing lay. Without saying another word, he sat down, and we knew we had struck home with that picture. He looked it over and started to shake his head and said, "No, the face is almost round. It doesn't come to a point." Ledwith then made a third drawing, working with the men, and this is what he drew. No neck, no nose, and the head was almost a perfect circle, and if there was a mouth, it was only a thin line at best. The forearms and legs were thin and spindly, which they compared to broom handles. Neither party could recollect anything about the feet. During the drawing process, all of the witnesses were consistent, honest and direct, only with the exception of Billy, who seemed more interested in making what he saw more alluring rather than describing it as it actually was. Ledwith writes, "These 7 people, the 3 women and the 3 men, had told me almost parallel stories and had given me almost identical pictures." But unfortunately, this would be among the last polite media men the Sutton family would encounter, because now the sightseers had become a mob that was harassing the family day and night. The crowd that Ledwith and Lucky had encountered on Monday was already in the hundreds by midnight, and it would just increase by the next day, and the next, and the next. And quite soon, reporters from the wire services, being the people who find and sell stories to other news outlets, and other reporters from Kentucky, Indiana, and Tennessee found their way to the police station and the farm. One person wrote that the police station was jammed with people, most of them reporters. And right behind them came even more sightseers. The encounter with the little men was only for a night, and the beings did no harm, as Mrs. Glennie Langford observed. But this rural family would have to deal with crowds of humans now, who would only become progressively more and more hostile. Pretty soon, their remote home was now a prison made of people and parked cars. The doors to their home had no locks, so people had begun walking into the home without permission to talk to the adults and the children uninvited, and to take photos of them without permission. And outside of local news like Ledwith, newspapers would publish depictions of the aliens without even having asked the family or occupants of the home that night for anything.
Why don't you back it up with a source?
Source! My source is I made it the fuck up.
They would also publish assumptions about the family, saying it was lies for publicity. It was all fueled by alcohol. The creatures were escaped monkeys. The story became this giant game of telephone where the most important part of the story was no longer the story itself, but selling a headline that caught attention.
Hey, you're doing that thing again where you take everything I say out of context. You're trying to make it look like I think Coolsville sucks.
All Fred Jones had to say was,
I think Coolsville sucks.
in light of the city's recent
And, of course, this influenced how the sightseers interacted with the family in person. They were being portrayed as backwoods idiots, and nothing more. At one point, perhaps in a vain attempt to get crowds to go away, a sign was put up demanding payment for photos, interviews, and admission. But people ignored it, and they kept harassing the family regardless. But the sign prompted newspapers to start accusing the family of hoaxing this all for money. But investigators learned that no money was ever collected, outside of Billy getting some money for 2 interviews. The state police would be called in to clear out the crowds again and again, only for them to just return. As time passed, eventually the ridicule, crowds, and claustrophobic fear would subside, but the lies and allegations against the family would remain. However, that's until a ufologist by the name of Isabel Davis would set the record straight. She personally traveled to the Kelly-Hopkinsville area and for 4 days talked directly with witnesses, the police chief, and everyone involved that she could get a hold of, and would write down not only what they had to say, but her genuine opinion on their character. She wrote a book called Close Encounter at Kelly, which has since become the definitive and accurate written account of this case. You'll find a link in the description if you'd like to read it, because genuinely, it's well written and fascinating. It's from her that we discovered that the area had previous anomalous activity, as the police chief himself claimed that back in 1952, as he was driving, he and other drivers stopped their cars and got out, because they saw a levitating, glowing oval object in the sky above, which remained there for almost an hour before leaving at an incredibly high speed. And this UFO sighting was so public, the police chief estimated 75 to 100 people must have seen it. And it's probably due to this that Chief Greenwald took this case so seriously and treated the family with genuine respect and empathy. Isabel Davis would write, "He did not particularly conceal his attitude about UFOs, but neither did he flaunt it, and his professional competence protected him from ridicule." However, when Isabel Davis met the family, they weren't quite so inviting. They were in fact quite bitter, and deservedly so. She would find out later that JC had lost several jobs because of the stigmas attached to him by the press. Mrs. Langford was not glad to see me. Standing inside the screen door, she listened to my explanation and request for an interview, but shook her head. Davis was persistent and eventually did get her interview. And what she found out was why Mrs. Langford was so reluctant to talk to her. Langford would say, "The lies they told about us said we were drinking. The things they put in the newspapers, like saying there were 12 or 15 of them, people just want to make money out of it and sell things." And to Langford's credit, the people who wanted to set up concessions and sell souvenirs in her yard had all of their offers refused by the family. After her interview, Davis was very impressed by her character. She would write, "This rigid, unbending, dour woman, silently wishing I would go away and leave her alone, had made a deep impression on me. I understood what Chief Greenwald meant when he said, she was the most impressive witness. She's the type of person who wouldn't tell a lie if her life depended on it." Davis would then publish her book and all of her interviews and findings in 1978, and since then has been the gold standard for accuracy on this case. And that's the story of the Kelly-Hopkinsville encounter, but this case has never really gone away. It would help create stereotypes of alien visitations being associated with rednecks, and also help popularize the term Little Green Men, due to how inaccurate yet widespread the reporting was. And it would even influence modern pop culture. Sableye from Pokemon is based on the metallic creatures. And in Legend of Zelda Majora's Mask, you defend a ranch from attacking alien creatures attempting to steal cows. The scenario is inspired by both the Kelly-Hopkinsville encounter and the Flatwoods Monster, another alien encounter taking place in 1952. In closing, I think this case highlights how easily the media hysteria can catch a hold of people, and the dangers of how eager people can be to mock the unknown. Aside from Billy Ray Taylor, who had a career in the carnival working up crowds, the witnesses came across as honest and genuine to people investigating their claims, but still found themselves to be the victims, not from extraterrestrials, but victims of their own fellow human beings, who were just eager to mock and harass them. Isabel Davis wrote it best. She writes, "But perhaps it is unreasonable to expect the human race, which for so many thousands of years has considered itself unique in the universe, to judge without bias a report that we might have had a visit from the neighbors." Hey, this is Lately. If you liked this video, please consider supporting the channel with a membership. It'll help the channel grow and produce higher quality content just like this one. But otherwise, stay tuned for more.